On Saturday, March 30th, Joe Biden issued a proclamation that Sunday, Easter Sunday, this year was going to also be the Transgender Day of Visibility. Now, this set off a firestorm online, on different podcasts, on news networks, on radio shows, and justifiably so, because Joe Biden, his administration, and the Democratic Party know no bounds, no limits to their fealty to victimhood. But the outrage over this proclamation, while it is warranted, we are losing sight of what is truly the main thing. Welcome to Counter Thought. I've been gone for 2 weeks, gone for spring break, gone to take care of some personal things this past week. But I hope you enjoyed your Easter Sunday, your Transgender Day of Visibility, also known as your Oyster Sunday, with very large bunnies. Now, if you have no idea what that last joke was about, then you don't watch the news as closely as I do, but that's why I am here. That is why I am here, to bring the news, the political news, the cultural news to you. So on Saturday, I know this is going to be released on Wednesday, so we're a couple of days past, but the firestorm, the backlash continues. On Saturday, President Biden issued a proclamation for the Transgender Day of Visibility. Now, while this has caused a huge uproar online, on different broadcasts, different shows, different podcasts, and justifiably so, the main thing, in my opinion, is being lost. To me, there is another element of this that is actually encouraging and uplifting for those of us who are Christians and who see what is happening in this administration, in the leadership of our country, and really around the world. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the history of this Transgender Day of Visibility. So did you know, first and foremost, that the Transgender Day of Visibility began in 2009? And you may be thinking, okay, 2009, well, who was president in 2009? Obama, and then after Obama, Trump, and now Biden. So the Transgender Day of Visibility has been around for a while, right? It seems like you can just kind of come up with days that on a whim for whatever reason you want. There's not too much of a process to it. Actually, according to GLAAD, there are around 145 days in the US calendar that are dedicated or, recognizing some form of LGBTQIA+. 145. That's creeping pretty close to almost half of our days has some type of tie-in to that community. But while this has been around since 2009, President Biden is actually the first president to issue a proclamation. He is the first one to go the more formal, traditional route to issue a proclamation for this day. Obama didn't do it. Trump didn't do it. But Biden has done it. Biden has done it. And this is not surprising because the Biden administration, and he doesn't even know what's going on, but his administration and collectively a large group within the Democratic Party believe that all of this is necessary. They believe that the transgender people have not been seen. That is why they need this day of visibility. And you hear that in the proclamation issued by Biden in his White House. So let me read the proclamation to you, well, parts of it, because it's kind of lengthy. Much longer than the Easter statement, by the way. It goes, Transgender Day of Visibility celebrates the joy, strength, and absolute courage of some of the bravest people I know. People who have too often had to put their jobs, relationships, and lives on the line just to be their true selves. True selves. Today, we show millions of transgender and non-binary Americans that we see them. They belong, and they should be treated with dignity and respect. Their courage has given countless others strength, but no one should have to be brave just to be themselves. Every American deserves that freedom. And we're going to dive into this in a little bit here. It continues. My administration has fought to end these injustices from day one, working to ensure that transgender people in the entire LGBTQIA plus community can live openly and safely. There is much more to do. I will continue to call on Congress to finally pass the Equality Act to extend long overdue civil rights protections to all LGBTQIA plus Americans. America is founded on the idea that all people are created equal and deserve to be treated equally throughout their lives. We have never fully lived up to that, but we have never walked away from it either. Today, Sunday, March 31st, as we celebrate transgender people, we also celebrate every American's fundamental right to be themselves, bringing us closer to realizing America's full promise. Now, therefore, I, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States of America, by the authority of the Constitution and the laws of the United States, hereby proclaim March 31st, 2024 as Transgender Day of Visibility. I call upon all Americans to join us in lifting up the lives and voices of transgender people throughout our nation, eliminating violence and discrimination against all transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people. So that is the proclamation. Now, a couple of things that were stated in that proclamation. Joe Biden talks about, or the proclamation talks about, enabling the transgender people, protecting them so that they can be their true selves. Now, I hope that's not lost on you, because that's a little ironic, because if they are changing their gender, but this goes back to their belief, the progressive belief, many in the Democratic Party, and the mental state of individuals who are transgender, that they believe that their biological sex, their gender that they were assigned at birth, is not their true selves. That is why they state and say and use this terminology, because they believe that they are not their true selves. Now, we all know that there is something mentally off in these individuals. We know that they need some type of mental help. But if you say that, and you say that it could be part of the solution to doing gender mutilation, right, on children, that you cannot state those things, that you are just being dismissive, and you are denying those individuals of their freedom to be their true selves. In the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, he says he believes this, right? We have to take him at his word. He issued the proclamation. His White House for sure believes this. The fealty to the victimhood, right? You heard it in the statement. The fealty to the victimhood status that many Americans, transgender Americans, are not able to live the lives that they want to live, to enjoy the freedoms of this country, that they are victims, that there is violence against them, that they cannot feel confident in being their true selves. But Joe Biden isn't the only one to go above and beyond. He's not the only one to go above and beyond for this Transgender Day of Visibility, because who was there to follow him up on this proclamation? Governor Kathy Hochul of New York. Now, Governor Hochul, she took over for Cuomo when he was ousted, and then she actually won re-election, surprisingly, but also not surprisingly, but won re-election, and she's just been terrible while she's been governor of New York. Most recently she issued the National Guard to help with the subways, right, and the violence in making the subways more safe. But when a Republican mentioned doing that, a greater police force, You couldn't do that. You couldn't say that. You couldn't say that. You would be called racist, right? There would be an injustice to poor people. There'd be an injustice to those who feel like they must hop over and skip the fare. It would be an injustice to the homeless or the unhoused people. Couldn't do that. But when reality smacks you in the face, Governor Hochul's like, National Guard, we're going to increase our law enforcement presence. So in her truest form, no surprise, she issues a proclamation or statement of sorts to have all of the landmarks in New York, the primary landmarks, to be lit up in rainbow colors for the Transgender Day of Visibility, which, mind you, this year falls on Easter Sunday. And Governor Hochul, President Biden, and many others would call themselves Christians or devout Catholics. Biden definitely refers to himself as a devout Catholic numerous times during his presidency and during his entire time in Congress. So following that vein, Biden then begins to talk out of the other side of his mouth. He also issues an Easter statement. Pretty good statement, very short, one paragraph. The Transgender Day of Visibility was about 6 paragraphs. But anyway, he's trying to talk out both sides of his mouth. He issued an Easter statement, and I want you to remember what was said in the Transgender Day of Visibility proclamation, and then listen to what is stated here in this Easter statement. Jill and I send our warmest wishes to Christians around the world celebrating Easter Sunday. Easter reminds us of the power of hope and the promise of Christ's resurrection. As we gather with loved ones, we remember Jesus' sacrifice. We pray for one another and cherish the blessing of the dawn of new possibilities. And with wars and conflict taking a toll on innocent lives around the world, we renew our commitment to work for peace, security, and dignity for all people. We heard dignity in the Transgender Day of Visibility statement. From our family to yours, happy Easter, and may God bless you. Now, the Transgender Statement of Visibility mentions how transgender LGBTQIA plus individuals are made in the image of God, which is true. But the end of that verse from Genesis 1:27 is excluded, not only in the proclamation, but also whenever you hear it just in your day-to-day life. You don't hear the full verse, the end of the verse. And especially for this Transgender Day of Visibility proclamation, you cannot include that, because what does it say? I will read it to you. This is Genesis 1:27, NIV version. This is wrapping up Genesis 1, the creation of heaven and earth, the people, the animals, everything. Genesis 1:27. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And that is why that is not included in the proclamation. They want to have Christians, they find the squishy Christians, as they're called, to be like, oh yeah, like we are supposed to love. Yes, we're supposed to love, and God would love these individuals. Jesus would love these individuals. Yes, he would, and he does. So they're trying to manipulate you by leaving out the end of that verse. Man, male, and female. There's no non-binary. A non-binary individual, that's not how God created us. That's not how God created everyone in this world, whether you are a Christian or not a Christian. You were created male or female, not non-binary, not change your gender, not God got it wrong when he first created you. No. But they can't include that because that is completely against what they are proclaiming or claiming to be true. The individuals are being their true selves, not the self that God created them to be, but their true selves. And this is woven throughout this mentality on the left. Your truth, my truth. My truth isn't necessarily objective or absolute truth, right? Everything is not factual, right? The truth is not necessarily the truth according to me. It's according to what makes me feel good and what justifies my behavior, or what allows me to feel comfortable with who I am. So Joe Biden issues that proclamation, huge uproar, right? Public blowback was outrageous. I'm sitting here trying to have a nice, quiet Easter weekend, and my phone is blowing up with people I follow on X, reading news articles popping up on different apps, all talking about this. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? Sure enough, it's the proclamation. And yes, it has always been, since I guess 2009, on March 31st. And Easter bounces around year after year. But this year, they lined up. And that is what this big uproar was about. As I mentioned earlier, you had people on X, you had congressmen, you had news outlets, you had other media outlets, you had podcasters, you had radio hosts, you have just people who are famous people who are also, Christians speaking out about this, how this is a slap in the face and a disgrace. And Biden, who claims to be a devout Catholic, should be ashamed of himself. So the weekend rolls, the weekend ends, and obviously there are going to be questions by certain outlets about this at the Monday press briefing at the White House. So Karine Jean-Pierre, what does she do? Oh, Republicans are politicizing this. She's not the only one who's saying this. It's other pundits on MSNBC, ABC, CNN. Even squishy Republicans are saying this, who've kind of turned to the dark side, right? They're saying, oh, Republicans are just politicizing this. This is an opportunity, instead of having respect for those who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community. This goes right along with what we were stating about them being victims, and because Republicans and conservatives are unloving and using this to make to score political points. And then Joe Biden, somehow they got a hold of him, the media, somehow they got a hold of him to get his response. And when asked about, hey, what gives? Why'd you have to issue a proclamation? Why couldn't it just be the day that it is without an official proclamation from the White House? Why not issue the proclamation and move it for a day to be April 1st, or move it up a day to be March 30th, or just like Obama and Trump did, not even issue a proclamation. Like I said, there are 145 days, according to GLAAD, that are dedicated to LGBTQ community. Not all of them receive a proclamation. So this was intentional. But when Biden was asked about this and the public blowback, what was his response? I didn't do that. I didn't do that. Which asks two questions. One, is he telling the truth? If he's telling the truth and he didn't do that, then that means, as we've suspected for a long time now, that Biden is not in charge of the White House and someone else is just running with this, communications teams, advisors, strategists, and they're just doing whatever they want and basically signing his name off on it, because this was official proclamation, which did have his name, right? Basically his signature on the paper okaying this. So if he's telling the truth and he didn't do that, then that means that he is not in charge. That his communications team is just doing whatever they feel they can do, whatever is necessary, whatever they want to do. Or he's lying and felt like, hey, this is the best thing politically for me and my administration, is to say, I didn't do that. I'm not responsible for this. And then he can hold on to those who believe, that he is being a good person, right? That he is staying true to staying true to Catholicism. Polls show that the majority of people don't see Biden as a Christian, based upon his policies and the things that he says and that he does. But there is a portion, a cohort of his voters who still believe that. And again, he's trying to talk out both sides of his mouth. He has to continue to pledge fealty to victimhood while also trying to maintain and hold on to the Christian Democrats so they will vote for him. But the main takeaway, my main takeaway from this whole situation, and again, this happened over the weekend, and then Monday and Tuesday of this week is when it really played out, and this is being released on a Wednesday. So the story is beginning to fade. But most of the story, much like this episode, has been focused on the backlash, the uproar, the disrespect, right? The shenanigans that is this day of proclamation and it being on Easter this year. But the main thing to me that has not been discussed too much, that is getting lost in all of this, is this reminder that, yes, the outrage is warranted. Yes, the Democratic Party has a fealty to victimhood. We see it time and time and time again, virtue signaling at the wazoo. But despite all of the government power, despite what the President of the United States says, despite the proclamations that are released, that are issued by the President of the United States, Jesus is over all. God is over all. Jesus, as we celebrate on Easter, overcame death. He is the only religious figure, deity, who is alive. Jesus overcame death. Easter, the reason we celebrate it, will overcome this day of proclamation. The calendars lined up, and it caused this huge firestorm. People were outraged, and justifiably so. But do not lose sight that much like how Jesus overcame death, his resurrection, Easter and Jesus are also going to and have already overcome the shenanigans and the fealty and the decisions that are being made by those in our current government leadership. Not only here in America, but also around the world. So when things like this happen, do not lose sight of the big picture. Despite what the government says or does, proclamations they issue, beliefs that they have, yes, it impacts us in our daily lives. But remember that Jesus is over all. And Jesus has overcame death for you and me. And Jesus and Easter have already overcome this day of proclamation. Do not lose sight of the strength and the wonder of Jesus Christ. We are all children of God. We were all created in his image, male and female. So despite what is said, what someone's truth may be, and despite who it comes from, and the influence or the power that they may have, remember that Jesus paid it all, and he has already overcome it. Hi, I'm Brian Kletter, the creator and host of Counterthought. For more Counterthought content, watch these 2 videos and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and spread the word.